I have a back piece and a front piece of a cardigan here. The design is called Heartened by Kim Hargraves and it's knitted in pieces from the bottom up, and I've mistakenly knitted an extra 4 rows in the 2x2 rib section on the front piece than the back piece. The back piece is correct, the front piece is wrong. And this means that they're not going to match up when I sew them together along here. You can see how the garter stitch stripe here matches here, but this section is longer. So there really isn't any choice but to cut open the front piece horizontally, unravel the unwanted rows, and then graft it back together again. The easiest place to do the cutting and grafting is in the garter stitch section, because if it ends up being more uneven, the eye just won't notice it as much, and grafting garter stitch is so much easier than grafting 2x2 ribbing. And because I don't want to worry about having live stitches on both pieces of the fabric after I've cut it, I'm going to take a long circular needle of a much smaller size than what I used to knit these pieces up with, and I'm going to insert the needle into the row on the top part that I'm going to graft together before I even cut the knitting open. So this garter stitch section here was knitted on a 3mm needle, and this is a 2mm needle. I've turned the garment upside down, and when you graft you're going to have a front needle and a back needle. So I'm now going to choose the row that I want to have on my back needle. So this top section here is going to be on the back needle. With garter stitch grafting, it's important to have the purl bumps on my needle on the wrong side of the fabric for the back needle. So this top, as I said, will end up being on the back piece. That means that I need to put my needle through what look like knit stitches. So if I put my needle through these stitches here, I would have the purl bumps on the right side of the fabric. I want the purl bumps on the wrong side, so I need to put my needle through these stitches here that look like knit stitches. Just imagine that's 2 knit stitches in a row. They've got the V's like this. What I'm going to do is put my needle up through the middle of the V, so the middle of the knit stitch, up and over the left leg of the knit stitch, so in between the 2 stitches, and then back up through the center of the next stitch and then down over the left leg. So the right leg is always going to be free and the left leg is always going to be trapped underneath. That's what you're going to try to do. There's my first V, so I'm going to go up through the center of it, over the left leg, in between the next 2 stitches, up through the center, over the left leg, up through the center, over the left leg, up through the center, and just continue that all along the row. I've picked up my stitches all across the row, and now I'm just going to pull the stitches onto the cable part of the needle like that, and then turn the work around. I've got my work now the right side up again, and I'm going to choose a stitch in a row below that I'd like to cut. So just pull out one leg like this and snip it, and then I just carefully unravel all the way across. I've unravelled right across the row, separated both pieces. The stitches here on the top section are all ready to be grafted. I've unravelled down further, and now I just have to do the proper decreases that I need to do, a couple of rows of garter stitch, and then I'm ready to graft the 2 pieces together again. There are 7 rows of garter stitch here on the back piece, and I have to make sure that I end up with 7 rows of garter stitch on the front piece as well. Garter stitch has a 2-row repeat, so even though you knit every row, when you look at the fabric from one side, you'll see knit rows and purl rows. I've just completed 2 rows of garter stitch on my front needle, and there's 3 rows of garter stitch on my back needle. Now grafting is going to add 2 rows of garter stitch. Because we're doing a directional graft, the stitches on the back needle will act as the running threads between the stitches, and not as the heads of stitches, even though they originally were heads of stitches. So the stitches that come off the front needle will be one row and the grafting will be the second row. Now, if you didn't understand what I just said, that doesn't matter. That's just for those who want to know the theory of it. What's really important is when you're grafting the stocking stitch together is to position the stitches to be grafted on two needles, one in the front, one in the back. The wrong sides of the fabric should be facing each other, so that's the right side and that's the right side. The needles are pointing out this direction, and the most important bit is that you want to have purl bumps facing you on both needles. So this is my front needle, and you can see I've got the purl bumps right up close to the needle. And that happens to be the right side. This is my back needle, and what is facing me is the purl bumps right up close on the needle. That happens to be the wrong side, but that's exactly how you want it. If you've got it like that, you're right. My darning needle is attached to yarn on my front needle. This is what we call the front needle and the back needle, and it's the yarn that I unraveled those extra rows from. So to set up, we're going to go purlwise into the first stitch and leave it on, and then we're going to do knitwise into the back needle, pull it off, and then we're going to go purlwise into the second stitch and leave it on. So we want to make sure that this bit of yarn always stays underneath both needles. We can pull that one quite tight because it's the first one, but then after that it's much better to keep it loose and to clean up the slack of the stitches at the end. It's much easier. So now the pattern is exactly the same on both needles. We go knit off, purl on. On the back needle we go knit off, purl on. Knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on. So there's my very sloppy grafting row, and that's exactly what you want to have, because then it's very easy to see which legs to pull on to tighten it up. So that's where I finished. I go back to the beginning where I started, and I go systematically leg by leg and pull it tight. This is where you need patience. And there you can see I've got the start. I've got 3 lovely ridges. So here's the final result. You can't see I've done any grafting here in the garter stitch. The ribbing is the same length. It's nice and straight and even. I'm really thrilled with the result. So if you find you do a silly mistake like I did, you might want to try this too.